Before we begin, listener, remember to gently tap like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Tonight, I'll take you through the quiet halls where the walls still breathe, where every sound means something, even when no one's there to make it. 5 stories, each one a whisper left behind by those who never truly left. So, turn down the lights, lie still, and listen carefully, because some sounds don't stop when you wake up. The first sound came from Ashevale Asylum, on a night when the guard thought he was completely alone. The air grew heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. I stared at the wall behind the intercom, the one that shouldn't exist. Beneath the paint, the plaster bulged slightly, as though something on the other side had pressed too hard for too long. I lifted my flashlight, tracing the beam across the outline. The dust shifted, revealing faint finger marks, 5 of them, child-sized. My throat tightened. Then came another sound, not a knock this time, not even tapping. It was scratching, slow and deliberate, drawing lines into the wall from the other side. The noise rose and fell, like someone tracing letters they could no longer remember how to spell. I whispered, almost without meaning to, "Who's there?" No. The scratching stopped. In the silence, the building seemed to lean closer. I could hear the faint ticking of the old clock in the reception hall 2 floors away, and over that, a heartbeat, not mine, a steady, rhythmic pulse vibrating through the floorboards. I took a step back. My radio crackled, though I hadn't touched it. The frequency dial turned by itself, shifting through static until I heard a voice, male, hoarse, whispering under breath. "He's still inside. Keep the door locked." I froze. My ID badge caught the light as I glanced down, and that's when I noticed something written in marker across its plastic surface. Words I hadn't seen before my shift began. Ward C. Do not open. I dropped the badge. It hit the tiles, the sound echoing far longer than it should have. Somewhere behind me, a door hinge sighed open, just slightly. The air shifted, colder now. The faint smell of disinfectant sharpened into something metallic old blood, long dried, reawakened by damp. Then, from deep inside Ward C, came a slow, dragging sound. Not footsteps. Something heavier, softer, pulling itself closer with each muted scrape. And beneath it all, 3 more knocks, perfectly timed, answering the beat of my own pulse. The dragging noise grew louder, slipping between the knocks like a breathing pattern. 3 knocks pause, a long, wet scrape across the tiles. I knew the sound of a body being moved. I'd heard it before in other hospitals, during evacuations, during nights when the gurneys stuck to the floor from old blood. But this had no rhythm of hands or weight. It moved as if the floor itself was pulling something forward. The torchlight trembled in my hand. I wanted to radio for the caretaker on the lower floor, but the device had gone dead, its indicator light frozen on a weak red blink. Then, another sound layered itself over the rest. A faint metallic click. Then another, like locks turning, one by one, down the corridor. I turned toward the sound and saw at each door along Ward C, those heavy steel doors, rattling softly in their frames. The first one shook, then the second, then all of them in slow sequence, like a quiet round of applause echoing through metal. I whispered into the empty hallway, "Stop that, Che," and it did. Everything fell still, too still. The air in Asheville was never silent. There was always wind, or water through pipes, or the distant hum of old lights. But now, nothing. It was as if the building had gone deaf. Then came the sixth knock. But this time, it came from above. I looked up. The ceiling paint was blistered, cracked into webs of gray. Dust drifted down like ash. Another knock, this one closer, right above me. The plaster bulged outward for a second, pulsing like skin. The air pressure changed. My ears popped. I felt the floor shift beneath my boots, subtle, like a heartbeat traveling through concrete. I took a step back, but the hallway seemed longer than before. The far end where I'd entered looked dimmer, retreating into a shadow that moved. A shape stood at the edge of my torch's reach, just enough to see the outline. A figure hunched, pale, with something slung low from its arms. It wasn't walking. It slid. Every muscle in my body froze. And then the intercom came alive again. Ward C, secure the guardroom, close door. The voice, fragmented, sped up, repeated itself in reverse, and through the distortion came another sound, faint laughter, distant, but too human. I stumbled backward, hitting the nurse's desk. The flashlight rolled across the tiles, spinning light over the walls, and there they were again. Those numbers scratched into the paint. 3, 3, 1, 5. A new one had been added. That's when I noticed the pattern. Each time the knocks came, another number appeared. The laughter stopped. The dragging noise started again. But now it was right behind the wall, following my movements, syncing with my steps. I tried to breathe quietly, but the air whistled through my teeth, and the sound echoed louder than it should have. It came back distorted like someone else breathing through me. The lights above me flickered once, twice, then died completely. Darkness folded over everything. In that silence, there was only one thing left: the knocks circling the room. Not from one place anymore, from every direction at once. 3 slow beats. 1 pause. Then another knock inside my own chest. And I realized it was counting. The silence after the last knock was unbearable. It pressed against my ears until I could hear the blood moving through them, a slow rush that sounded almost like footsteps. I whispered, just to hear my own voice. "Who's there? Thanks for watching." No answer, only a faint hiss of air, drawn in from cracks in the walls. My flashlight flickered once more before dying completely. Darkness swallowed the hall. But even then, I could see, not with my eyes, with something else. Every sound had its shape. The creak of the ceiling above painted a slow line of motion in the air. The distant drip of water marked depth, like a heartbeat from below. And in front of me, beyond the nurse's desk, there was breathing. Shallow, steady, too close. I took one careful step forward. The tile beneath my boot shifted, brittle and damp. The breathing stopped, not because it had gone away, but because it was listening back. I waited, counted the rhythm of my pulse. 3 seconds, 4. Then, knock. Right in front of me. The sound hit my chest like a physical touch. The air trembled with it, as if the wall itself had spoken. I reached out. My fingers brushed the cold paint. Beneath it, I could feel a vibration, not mechanical, not echo. It pulsed. Slow, deliberate, human. I pressed my palm flat against it, and the knocking stopped. For a moment, there was nothing, No light, no sound, just the faint warmth of my own hand against the wall. Then something pressed back. It wasn't the same rhythm as before. It matched my pulse, my breathing, mirroring every small movement as if a second self were trapped inside the wall, perfectly synchronized. A cold whisper slid through the crack near my ear. "You came back. You always come back." The words were wrong, not the sound, but the way they bent around the space, wrapping the syllables in echoes that didn't belong. I stumbled back. My shoulder hit the desk, sending a file tumbling to the floor. The folder burst open, pages scattering across the tiles. Under the flicker of my phone's weak light, I saw the front page, a report labeled Incident, Ward C, 3:31 a.m. My eyes caught the date. 6 October 1998. The same date as tonight. I flipped through the sheets, hands shaking. The notes were short, clinical. Security personnel found deceased. No forced entry. Sound of repeated knocking reported prior to incident. Quite. The signature at the bottom made my stomach twist. The name was mine. I felt something slide across the floor behind me. A whisper of fabric. A footstep soft, careful, circling. The room had shape again. The air moved in rings. I raised the phone. The beam caught something just beyond the edge of light, the outline of a shoe. Black. Regulation issue. Exactly like mine. Then came the reflection. Not from glass, there wasn't any, but from the polished tile at my feet. A figure stood there, facing me. The same uniform, same flashlight, same posture, except the mouth was moving. It spoke without sound. And then, the wall behind it rippled like water. Knock. The tiles vibrated beneath me. Knock. My reflection tilted its head. Knock. It smiled. The sound built faster now from the floor, from the walls, from inside my chest, all merging into a rhythm that felt too perfect, too alive. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands over my ears, but the knocking was inside me now, rattling through bone. Then, abruptly, silence. When I looked up, the reflection was gone. Only the faint outline of handprints remained on the tiles, a pair matching my own. The intercom crackled once more. The guard is inside. And then, one final knock from behind my back. For a long while after that final knock, nothing moved. The air in the ward settled, heavy and stale, as if it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. I stayed crouched on the floor, the cold seeping into my knees. My phone light flickered weakly, its battery icon red, the only sign that time was still moving. When I finally stood, the intercom was silent. The hum of the old building returned that faint, living sigh of pipes and distant wind. It almost felt normal again. I told myself it had all been electrical faults, the sound of metal expanding, the wind trapped in forgotten vents, anything that made sense. I even laughed once, short and hollow, just to hear a human sound again. As I walked back toward the guard room, the corridor looked different, less distorted, less alive. The doors no longer rattled. The smell of iron and mold was still there, but faint, fading. I picked up my dropped ID card. The words Ward C, Do Not Open were gone, replaced by the standard hospital logo. My reflection in the plastic looked tired but real. For the first time that night, I felt like myself. Inside the guard room, I switched on the emergency lamp, its yellow glow spilling over the desk, soft and weak. The familiar objects came back to life. My thermos, my half-eaten sandwich, the radio set. I pressed the radio button out of habit. This time, it worked. Static hissed softly, comforting in its emptiness. Ashevale Security. Ward C reporting. No further disturbances, I said. My voice shook only slightly. Copy that. Ward C. A voice replied, calm, distant. End of shift in 20 minutes. You're clear. Place. Relief flooded me so quickly I almost laughed again. 20 minutes. Then I could leave this place behind and never think about it again. The warmth of the lamp made the shadows dance gently along the wall. I poured coffee into the lid of my thermos, inhaling the bitter scent. The normalcy felt almost too sweet, like sugar after blood. And then, knock. Soft. Harmless. From the desk itself. I froze. The sound came again, slower, duller, like something inside the wooden drawer shifting. I opened it. Inside were papers, keys, and my old wristwatch. The watch ticked steadily, 3 beats. Pause. 1. 3, 3, 1. Exactly the pattern I'd heard before. I lifted it closer. The glass face had cracked in a perfect circle, as if something had pressed out from beneath it. And beneath the glass, the second hand wasn't ticking anymore, it was knocking. Tiny vibrations pulsed through the metal strap, matching the rhythm that had haunted me all night. I dropped it back into the drawer, slammed it shut, and pressed my hand against the wood. The knocking continued, muffled but constant, spreading through the desk like a heartbeat. My radio hissed again, but now the static wasn't random. It was rhythmic. 3 short bursts. 1 pause. Then another burst, lower, like a whisper hidden in code. You said 20 minutes. Was. I stood still. My name echoed faintly through the static, spoken in my own voice. The lamp flickered. Once. Twice. I turned toward the door. It was closed. The handle twitched slightly, then went still. And for a brief, blissful second, I thought maybe it's just the wind again. But then the intercom clicked alive one last time. Guardroom secured. Lock the inside. The same words as before, only this time they didn't echo. They came from the small speaker on the desk, the one directly beneath my hand. Knock. The knock beneath my hand didn't stop this time. It grew steadier, slow, powerful, deliberate, like a pulse that wasn't mine, but had somehow taken control of my own heartbeat. I stepped back from the desk. The air had changed again, heavy and electric. My coffee cup began to tremble, tiny ripples forming across its surface. Every object on the table seemed to hum in unison, vibrating to the same impossible rhythm. The radio crackled. The voice returned distorted, broken by static, yet painfully familiar. Open. It's waiting. Open, or it'll find another way. Well, first, I didn't answer. The air was too thick to breathe. My lungs stuttered against the rhythm, desperate to escape it, but the sound kept finding its way inside me. I grabbed the ring of keys from the drawer, my hands slick with sweat, and stumbled toward the hallway. Every light along Ward C was pulsing in time with the knocks now, a chain of dull yellow beacons guiding me forward like something leading livestock to slaughter. The further I walked, the more the rhythm shifted from wood to metal, from walls to floor, as though the sound had learned the shape of the building. It moved like thought instant, everywhere, I stopped outside the sealed door at the far end of the corridor. It was marked Ward C, restricted access, in faded red paint. The padlock was old, eaten with rust, but it looked wet. The air around it was colder. Each breath I took came out in white clouds. The knocks slowed, waiting. I should have turned back. I should have waited for dawn. But the voice from the radio still echoed in my head open. Or it'll find another way. And in the silence between each heartbeat, I could swear I heard something whispering behind the door. It's only you left. Remember, cannot herself. I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, too perfectly, like it had been waiting for my hand. The moment the latch turned, a gust of freezing air burst through the cracks, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic and rot. The door groaned open. Inside was a narrow corridor leading to a small isolation room. The walls were padded, worn in places. The floor glistened with moisture that reflected the faint light from my torch. And in the center, there was a chair. Metal restraints hung loose at the sides, and on the wall above it deep scratches, carved in rhythmic lines. 3 vertical bar, 3 vertical bar, 1 vertical bar, 5 vertical bar, 6. 1 new mark, fresh. The knocking started again, softer now, not demanding, not angry, almost gentle, like someone trying to remind me of a tune I'd forgotten. I took another step inside. The door closed behind me with a quiet click. No wind, no movement, just that steady rhythm beneath my feet. I reached the chair. My torch beam landed on a shape in the corner, a uniform, security issue. Mine. The air thickened, sound swelling all around like pressure before a storm. The intercom above the door hissed to life once more. Time, 0331. Guardroom secured. Ward C open. Wham! The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It was clear. And it was mine. The realization hit too late. My flashlight blinked out, plunging me into perfect black. Then, every surface in the room began to knock the walls, the floor, the ceiling, all in sync with my racing heart. The sound grew faster, louder, until it was no longer knocking at all, but a pounding chorus of hollow echoes, chanting a rhythm that vibrated in bone. I pressed my hands to my ears, screamed, but the sound came from inside my head, ricocheting through skull and teeth. Then everything stopped. A breath against my neck. Close. Too close. You finally opened it. Hand to Exter. The cold hand pressed against my shoulder. The touch wasn't solid, it was made of air and memory, like something that had been waiting in my absence. I turned and saw myself, pale, motionless, standing just inside the doorway. The other me lifted a hand and placed it against my chest. Knock. The sound didn't come from the walls anymore. It came from my ribs. Pain flashed white, not sharp, but deep, spreading warmth through my body as if something ancient had found a way in. My lungs seized. My vision tilted. The last thing I saw was the chair, empty again. And on the wall beside it, a new mark carved by invisible hands. 3 vertical bar, 3 vertical bar, 1 vertical bar, 5 vertical bar, 7. One higher than before. Then everything fell away. When I woke, I was sitting in the guardroom, daylight spilling through the cracks in the blinds. The thermos was cold. The clock on the wall read 3:31 a.m. The radio crackled softly beside me. Morning shift reporting. All clear. Ward C. Way. I swallowed hard. My hands were trembling. On the back of my left hand, 5 faint bruises formed the shape of fingertips, small, childlike. And somewhere deep in the walls of Ashvale Asylum, 3 soft knocks answered the beat of my heart. Morning came without color. The fog over the Somerset Hills hung thick around the asylum, swallowing the rising sun before it could touch the windows. I signed the end of shift report with a hand that didn't feel like mine. The paper beneath my pen trembled faintly, though the air was still. The supervisor's voice came through the radio, distant, routine. Good work. Ward C. The transport will arrive shortly. 1 removal scheduled. And say, 1 removal, I repeated, half asleep. The clipboard on the desk listed only 1 name, unidentified, recovered from Ward C. Time of death, 3:31 a.m. I stared at the number until the ink blurred. Outside, I heard the low rumble of an engine. Through the fog, headlights glowed pale against the gate. An old transfer van, white, unmarked. The driver didn't get out. He only leaned forward enough for me to see a reflection in the glass, his eyes open but unmoving. The back doors opened by themselves. Inside, I glimpsed a single stretcher draped in canvas, straps hanging loose. The same smell of antiseptic drifted out the same air that had filled Ward C. A faint knocking came from within the covered shape. 3 slow beats. 1 pause. Then silence. My heart answered the rhythm before I could stop it. 3 beats. Pause. 1 more. The driver turned his head toward me, mechanical and slow. Brighton. Delivery by dawn. Waytune. The van's engine groaned to life, wheels crunching over gravel as it rolled down the fog-soaked road. I watched it until it disappeared, the echo of its rattling doors fading into the mist. When I looked back at the desk, the transfer slip was gone. Only my badge remained face down. On the back of it, written in faint marker, were 5 numbers: 3, 3, 1, 5, 7. And beneath them, a new word, written in a trembling hand. Next. Raider. Story 2. Cold Transfer. It was my first night shift at St. Aurelia Morgue, a place the sea had almost forgotten. The salt in the air ate through the locks, and the wind carried the sound of waves into the cold hallways, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Just after midnight, the call came through. Transfer from Ashvale Asylum. 1 body. ETA 5 minutes. What? I wasn't supposed to handle arrivals alone, but the night porter had gone home sick, so I waited by the loading bay, clipboard trembling in my hands, breath ghosting in the air. Headlights cut through the fog, an old transfer van, white, engine humming too evenly, as if it were idling underwater. It stopped without a driver stepping out. The rear doors opened on their own. Inside lay a single stretcher, wrapped in heavy canvas, frost clinging to the zipper like veins of glass. When I touched the metal tag, it burned cold against my skin. It read only 1 word: Ashvale. And as I leaned closer, the zip twitched just once, like something beneath the sheet had quietly drawn breath. The van's doors closed on their own the moment I wheeled the stretcher inside. The slam echoed through the morgue like a gunshot swallowed by concrete, and for a few seconds, the only sound left was the slow roll of the gurney wheels against the tile. The air inside sent Aurelia was colder than it should have been. My breath trailed ahead of me like smoke, curling against the fluorescent light that hummed with a tired pulse. The tag on the body still read Ashvale, no date, no initials, no case number. Just that one word, as if the name itself were enough to explain everything. I parked the stretcher beside the intake table and reached for the zipper. The fabric was stiff with frost. When I pulled, it resisted, then released with a whisper that sounded uncomfortably like a sigh. Inside was ordinary. A male body, mid-40s, uniform still intact. The ID badge was half melted, but I could make out a fragment of the lettering. Security. I checked for lividity, pale, uneven, skin temperature, 5 degrees above expected. The eyes were closed, but a faint fog clung to the lashes, as though moisture had gathered from the inside. When I leaned closer to confirm, my breath condensed on the cornea, and something inside the pupil moved. It was so slight I almost doubted it. A flicker, a tremor, a reflection where there shouldn't have been one. I stepped back, swallowing the taste of metal rising in my throat. My recorder in my breast pocket clicked on by itself, a red light blinking. I hadn't pressed it. Specimen received, 23:30 hours. My own voice spoke through the speaker, even though my mouth hadn't opened. Then, 3 faint clicks came through the playback. Soft, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I turned off the device. The sound didn't stop. It was coming from the metal table from beneath the stretcher. I knelt, shining my light under the wheels. A thin layer of frost had formed across the tiles, spreading outward like veins. In the center, where the gurney legs touched the floor, the ice had cracked in the shape of a hand. 5 small prints, perfectly formed. And as I stared, the wheels began to move, just an inch. Then another. Slow, careful, rolling itself toward the examination room. The gurney rolled ahead of me as if pulled by the air itself. The rubber wheels whispered across the tiles, tracing a perfect line toward the autopsy room, the only place still lit by the emergency lamp. I followed, every step echoing back in pairs, as though someone walked just behind me. The overhead light flickered once, twice, then steadied into a dim green haze. The hum of the refrigeration units joined in low, constant, almost like breathing. I told myself it was a trick of nerves, but when I stopped, the sound stopped too. And when I exhaled, something else exhaled after me. The gurney halted beside the examination table. I reached for the side latch. The canvas was stiff, yet I could see faint condensation gathering under the fabric. A pulse of fog escaped from the zipper, soft, deliberate, like a sigh. I touched it. It was warm. That was impossible. I stepped back. The recorder in my coat crackled again, though I hadn't turned it on. My own voice bled through the static, slow, distorted, caught in loops. Arrival confirmed. Ashvale. Single unit. 3:31. Then, faintly, beneath the playback, the sound of metal wheels turning. I turned toward the corridor. Nothing. But when I looked back at the stretcher, the zipper had moved. Just a little, maybe an inch. The metal teeth were parting upward, tooth by tooth, in a smooth, mechanical rhythm. And under that slow unzipping came another sound, a low, rhythmic thump. It took me a moment to realize what it was. A heartbeat. I froze, listening. It was steady, too steady. not fading, not human. It came from the gurney, from the cold canvas that now pulsed faintly with each beat. The overhead light dimmed further, its hum lowering into a vibration that rattled the glass jars along the wall. Inside one, a preserved lung began to tremble, bubbles forming at the top as if it, too, were trying to breathe. My hands were shaking. I stepped closer again, my breath fogging the air between us. The zipper twitched once more. Zip. Stop. Zip, like a mechanical sigh, timed with the pulse. I whispered, "Is anyone here?" And Ribly. My own voice came back through the recorder, overlapping itself, delayed by a full second. Here, here, here. The echo didn't fade. It began to count. 3, 3, 1, 5, 7. My heart seized in my chest. Those same numbers. The same pattern carved into the wall at Ashvale. The light above the table burst, showering glass dust across the floor. For a moment, the entire room went dark, but the shape beneath the canvas still glowed faintly, as if lit from within. I backed away. My heel struck the wheel of another gurney, and it began to move too, rolling gently toward the table, drawn by an unseen current. One after another, every stretcher in the morgue began to turn, their wheels groaning softly, metal on tile, like an orchestra of ghosts waking from cold sleep. The zip on the first stretcher reached its end. Silence. Then a wet click, like air filling lungs after a long absence. I raised my flashlight. The beam trembled across the canvas. The surface rose and fell. Slowly. Deliberately. Breathing. The breathing beneath the canvas was too steady to be a trick of sound. I could see it a slow rise and fall, as though the body inside was simply asleep, not gone. The air around the stretcher shimmered faintly, a haze of frost twisting into pale ribbons. The temperature gauge on the wall blinked, red dropping until the screen froze completely. I reached for the zipper, my fingers trembling. The metal was slick with condensation, warm where it should have been frozen. The first inch parted with a whisper, then another. The sound was softer than fabric should allow, not a scrape, but a sigh, drawn through lips that no longer belonged to the living. As the opening widened, a faint exhale escaped, brushing my wrist. It was cold, damp, real. I told myself to stop, to call someone, to not look, but the silence that followed was unbearable. I pulled the zipper halfway down. A pale face emerged, skin bluish under the flickering light, the mouth slightly open as if mid-word. A hospital uniform. A badge cracked, stained, but still legible. Ashvale Security. Night duty. I stepped back, my breath hitched. It was him. The guard from the report I'd read during induction, the one found dead in Ward C. Time of death, 3:31 a.m. His eyelids fluttered. Just once. The motion was so slight I almost convinced myself it was settling air, but then the lips moved stiff, delayed forming shapes with no sound. The recorder in my pocket clicked on by itself. Static filled the room, followed by a faint, fragmented voice. "Open. It's waiting." The same words I'd heard in the previous tape from Ashvale's archives. I stumbled backward, bumping into the second gurney. The wheels squeaked softly, answering in rhythm 1, 2, 3. Then the first gurney responded knock, knock, knock. The sound bounced between them, an invisible dialogue carried through metal and cold. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the knocks continued from inside my chest, echoing against bone. The corpse's eyes snapped open, milky, unfocused but aware. The pupils expanded in the dim light, black swallowing blue, until only void remained. The chest rose once more, deeper now, and the lips parted. The voice that came out wasn't human anymore, a hollow resonance that seemed to vibrate through the tiles, through the air, through me. You brought me back. Well, I fell against the wall. My knees buckled. The entire room felt smaller, the walls flexing inward with each breath he took. Transfer completed. Bang self. The voice faded into the static of the recorder. Then, abruptly, silence. The body went still. The frost stopped forming. Even the humming of the freezers ceased, as if the building itself were holding its breath again. I inched forward. The badge hung loose on his collar, swinging gently. I reached out just to turn it over, to make sure it was real. The instant my fingers brushed the plastic, the tape recorder spoke again. Destination confirmed. My Graston. A faint smile lingered on his lips. And before I could pull away, his hand stiff, white, impossibly cold, gripped my wrist. The pressure was weak, but deliberate. His thumb pressed against the pulse in my arm, counting. 1, 2, 3. Then he released me. The light flickered once more and died completely. In the darkness, the zip began to close itself, tooth by tooth, sealing him back inside. Each metallic click rang out like a heartbeat, slow, final, certain. And beneath it, somewhere deep inside the morgue's steel walls, I heard the echo of another zipper sliding open. When the last click of the zipper faded, the room felt heavier but calm, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm has passed. I stayed frozen beside the wall, staring at the covered stretcher. The air no longer shimmered. The lights, though dim, had stopped flickering. Even the recorder had fallen silent, its red light gone out completely. I whispered to no one, "It's over." Nay. The words came out thin, almost fragile, but they sounded solid enough to believe. I forced myself to move one careful step after another until I reached the intercom. The line crackled when I pressed the button. St. Aurelia intake room. Specimen confirmed. Proceeding to log entry. At helm. My voice steadied as I spoke. I focused on procedure writing, recording, cataloging anything that made sense. I opened the morgue logbook, flipping through its cold pages. A faint scent of formalin lingered. The ink bled slightly from the damp air. The last entry before mine was dated 2 weeks ago. Under origin, someone had already written Ashvale Asylum. I didn't remember seeing that before. I closed the book quickly, as if that could erase it. The sound of the ventilation system returning to life startled me. It hummed softly overhead, pushing a weak draft through the room. The temperature began to rise 1 degree, then another. My breath no longer fogged. For the first time since the van arrived, the place felt human again. I poured myself a cup of water from the dispenser. The stream gurgled and hissed, almost musical after hours of static and silence. When I raised it to my lips, the surface rippled. I stopped breathing. 3 perfect ripples, a pause, then one more, just like the knocks at Ashvale. The cup slipped from my hand, shattering across the tiles. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating in short bursts. I snatched it up, grateful for a distraction. The screen showed an incoming call. Control Room Transport Division. I answered. This is intake. The body from Ashvale has arrived. Whis. A pause. Negative, the voice replied. Vans still grounded in Somerset. Heavy fog. They haven't left yet. Why? I stared at the stretcher. The canvas lay still. The zipper sealed, but the faint imprint beneath it, the rise and fall, was back. That can't be right, I whispered. It's already here. One something. The line hissed. The voice on the other end faltered, fractured. Who's there with you? Has it SETI people sex? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The temperature dropped again, so fast that mist formed around the metal tables. Something dripped from the edge of the stretcher, a clear droplet, then another, not blood, but condensation, pooling where breath should end. The intercom clicked alive on its own. Transfer complete, awaiting return order. Has say. I froze, staring at the speaker. The voice was mine, recorded, replayed, and layered with static. The morgue clock ticked once, then stopped. Every sound folded into silence except the slow slide of metal. The zipper. It was moving again, but not opening this time. It was closing tight, deliberate, as if something inside was pulling it shut from within. Then came one single sound that turned my stomach cold. A faint exhale. Right behind me. I turned nothing. When I looked back, the stretcher was empty. The canvas sagged, flat against the frame. Only the metal tag remained, swinging gently, catching the dying light. Ashvale. I stood there, breathing hard, until I realized the sound echoing in the room wasn't coming from me. It was slower, older, from somewhere beneath the floor. 3 beats. Pause. One more. Final climax and escape to 1. 000 words. The silence after that last breath was worse than any scream. It wasn't empty. It was expectant. I could feel the morgue listening. The pipes ticked softly. The floor trembled under my shoes. Somewhere behind the walls, compressors and cold coils were stirring like lungs, inhaling for the first time in years. I reached for the main switch to cut the power the panel sparked. Dead. The emergency lights flickered red, tinting the metal tables in the color of dried blood. That's when the first sound came. A slow, dragging screech of steel, one of the body drawers sliding open by itself. Then another, and another. The noise layered on itself, a dozen metal mouths gasping in sequence. From each drawer came a faint hiss, followed by the dry rustle of plastic. Zippers. Opening. One after another, like 100 quiet insects unfolding their wings in the dark. The air filled with the scent of brine and antiseptic, mixed with something older, like rain trapped in stone. I stumbled backward. Every zipper was moving in rhythm. Zip, pause, zip, pause, and between each one came a long, synchronized inhale. They were breathing. I could hear it, dozens of low, uneven breaths echoing off the tiles, some shallow, some deep, all trying to find the same tempo, the same pattern. 3. Pause. 1. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound was inside my skull now, pulsing behind my eyes. Then came the wheels. Every gurney in the room began to move, metal legs scraping lightly as they drifted toward the center. The sound of hundreds of tiny bearings spinning filled the air like a swarm of insects made of steel. They gathered around the empty stretcher, the one tagged ash veil. My knees buckled. I crawled toward the door, slipping on the frost spreading across the floor. It clung to my hands, coating my skin in thin crystals. When I pulled away, 5 small prints appeared in the ice, identical to the ones I'd seen before. The recorder on the desk burst into static again. Transfer complete, awaiting return. Then another voice layered over it. Fainter, slower. My own destination, Saint Aurelia, received, quote. The lights flickered once more. In the brief flashes of red, I saw figures standing among the gurneys, vague, translucent shapes, still bound in sheets that swelled and fell as they breathed. One of them turned its head toward me. Its mouth opened, stretching wide. Return trip confirmed. They saw. The sound wasn't spoken. It vibrated through the floor, through the walls, through the marrow of my bones. Something inside the empty stretcher shifted. The sheet rose. I forced myself up and ran, nearly slipping on the frost. The exit door loomed ahead, but when I grabbed the handle, it burned my palm freezing cold. A voice came from behind me. Palm. Familiar. You forgot the tag. Well. I turned. Standing beside the ash veil stretcher was the man in the security uniform, pale, motionless, watching. His hand rested on the metal tag, swinging it gently by its chain. Someone has to bring it back. He selfed. He took one step toward me, and the wheels of every gurney turned with him. The air grew thick, the cold blooming in layers until my breath came out as shards of glass. I stumbled through the doorway, slamming it shut behind me. The corridor beyond was flooded with fog, lit by a single flickering light. The hum of the refrigeration units turned into a deep mechanical growl, then into something almost human, the sound of 100 people whispering in unison. Transfer, transfer, transfer. I ran. The sound followed zip, knock, breath, building into a rhythm that filled every corridor, every vent, every inch of space. When I burst through the main doors, the fog outside swallowed me whole. The parking lot was empty, no van, no driver, only tracks in the frost, leading away toward the road that vanished into the sea. The recorder in my pocket crackled once more. Arrival confirmed. Ashvale. One body. Dressed today. I pulled it out and threw it onto the ground, smashing it against the asphalt. It didn't break. The red light still blinked. Then headlights bloomed through the fog. The same white van rolled toward me, slow and soundless, its engine idling like a heartbeat underwater. The rear doors opened. Inside waited a single empty stretcher, straps undone. The tag hanging from the handle read, Estain, Aurelia, return. The air around me tightened, pressing against my chest. For a moment, I couldn't tell whether I was standing still or being pulled forward. The voice came again, from everywhere at once. Get in. The road's short. The cold will keep you. Wides. My body moved before my mind did. One step, then another. The van's interior was dark, but the floor shimmered faintly with frost. I could hear the ocean somewhere nearby, its waves counting the seconds. I touched the metal stretcher. It was warm. Then the doors closed behind me. The engine's hum deepened into the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. 3. Pause. 1. And the world outside began to fade. I woke to movement. The hum of the engine was low, steady, almost kind. For a moment, I thought I'd fallen asleep in the office, that the night had been a dream stitched together by exhaustion. But the air was too cold, too still. It pressed against my face like glass. I sat up. Canvas above me, metal beneath. A stretcher. The straps hung loose across my chest. Frost gathered at their edges. When I turned my head, I saw the walls smooth, pale, windowless. The faint light of motion blurred across them as the van moved. Through the thin metal shell, I could hear it. The waves. We were near the sea, heading inland. My throat ached when I spoke. Hello. Way. The only answer was the rhythmic thud of the wheels. 3 rotations. Pause. 1 more. I lifted my hand. The tag at the end of the stretcher swung, faintly glowing in the dark. Destination, Asheville Asylum. Something shifted beside me, soft fabric brushing against canvas. Another stretcher. Another shape beneath the sheet. The zipper moved once, drawing a single line of silver in the dark. Then a whisper, thin and calm, drifted from inside the other shroud. You're almost home, and itself. The van slowed. The engine idled. Through a small gap in the rear doors, I saw a faint light ahead, tall windows, broken glass, the familiar silhouette of Asheville Asylum, waiting under the morning fog. And from deep inside those crumbling walls came a sound I'd heard once before, faint, hollow, like someone whispering through plaster. Not words, just a rhythm. 3. Pause. 1. As the van doors opened, the voice beside me spoke again. The theater's ready. I'd film. Story 3. The Whisper in Theater 9. Rain followed me all the way back to Asheville Asylum. It hissed through broken gutters and slid along the glass of the abandoned East Wing, whispering over every window like it knew my name. They sent me here to check the remains, to list what was left of the old surgical wing before the reconstruction. Theater 9. A room sealed after the fire in '98. My torch cut through the damp air, glinting off dust that moved like mist. The corridors were silent except for the storm outside and the steady drip of water from somewhere above. When I reached the theater door, the metal plaque was half melted, the number still visible beneath the soot. I pressed my ear to the cold steel before opening it. Inside, a single hanging lamp swayed gently, casting shadows that moved without rhythm. The air smelled of burnt antiseptic. I switched on my recorder. Entry log, 2340, Asheville Asylum, Theater 9 inspection in progress. The speaker crackled, and through the static, another voice, soft, male, distant, completed my sentence. Don't let the theater sleep again. Caned. The door groaned open as if it hadn't moved in decades. The smell that came out was thick and layered formalin, ash, and something faintly sweet like burnt linen. My light swept across the room. Theater 9 was smaller than I imagined. Walls blistered with old heat. Metal frames blackened and fused to the tiles. The glass observation window had melted, leaving a sagged ripple like the surface of cooling wax. I could still hear the rain above, but in here it sounded different, distant, filtered, almost like whispering beneath water. I walked toward the center, my shoes scraping over flakes of paint and glass. On the wall beside the main light switch, Someone had scrawled in chalk, "Stay awake." The letters were half erased by moisture, their white dust trickling down the wall like veins. I turned on the surgical lamp overhead. The bulb hesitated before coming alive, flickering once, then casting a yellow cone onto the rusted operating table. The table wasn't empty. A recorder sat in the middle, old-fashioned reel-to-reel, the tape half-threaded. Its spools twitched once as the power surged through the room, then stilled again. I checked my own recorder. It was still running. My voice played back faintly through the speaker. Entry log, 2340, Asheville Asylum. Then, over it, another voice, calm, almost kind. "You came back, Ezra." I froze. The voice wasn't in the room. It was inside the walls. I pressed my hand to the cold tile. The vibration under my palm was faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat, or a steady breath held too long. I followed it to the corner, where a large ventilation grill hung loose. Rust streaked down the wall beneath it. From behind the slats came the whisper again, clearer this time, layered with another voice, female, softer. "They're waiting in the theater, and to self." I lifted my torch. The light slid across the vent's metal surface, and something flickered behind it, a movement too smooth to be dust. I bent down, trying to see inside. The air seeping through the holes was cold, wet, and faintly smelled of disinfectant and smoke. The whisper came again, right beside my ear this time. "Don't let us fall asleep." Well, I spun around. No one there. But the hanging lamp above the table was swaying again, though no wind touched it. On the soot-stained wall behind it, a faint silhouette was forming a darker shadow among shadows, shaped like someone standing very still. And then, from the vent, a slow, steady tapping began. 3 beats. Pause. 1. The tapping from the vent didn't stop. It grew steadier. 3. Pause. 1, as though the wall itself had learned to breathe in time. I turned the lamp toward it, the light catching in the thin mist that clung to the room. Dust particles swirled like ash caught in slow wind, and somewhere within that swirl I heard another sound, the faintest murmur of voices overlapping. At first I thought it was the rain echoing through the pipes, but when I moved, the whisper followed, adjusting to my steps, repeating the scrape of my soles on the tile, a half-second too late, like a mimic learning rhythm. I tried to record it. Testing, Theater 9 audio sample. The playback came instantly, distorted. A second voice layered beneath mine. 9. Audio. Alive. The words bent themselves to fit what I'd said. I could hear breath between syllables, not digital hiss, human breath. My heart thudded against my ribs, and the sound vibrated back from the walls hollow, metallic, delayed. The entire theater was echoing me, as if the space itself had lungs. From above, a steady drip began, water leaking through a crack in the ceiling, landing in a small metal basin left on the floor. Drip, drip, drip. But each droplet landed too precisely. 3 drops. Pause. 1. The same pattern again. The surgical lamp flickered and steadied, casting its cone of light across the table. The old reel-to-reel machine began to move, unprompted. The tape rolled forward, and the whisper shifted pitch, deeper, layered. I recognized fragments, medical terms, names, numbers. Case 9. Procedure log. Subject responsive. Then another voice, calmer, slower. The theater is listening. Creags. A metal tray rattled across the floor behind me, scalpel handles clinking together in rhythm with the words, "It never forgot your voice." Now. I turned. The shadow on the wall was gone, but on the blackened tiles near the sink, something new had appeared, white lines, drawn by moisture or residue, forming a pattern of digits. 3 vertical bar, 3 vertical bar, 1 vertical bar, 5 vertical bar, 7. I traced them with the beam of my torch, the numbers shining faintly, as if reflecting light from somewhere beneath the surface. My recorder clicked again, switching itself to playback. I hadn't touched it. Through static, a heartbeat pulsed, not mechanical, not recorded, wet, real. Then a voice whispered right into my ear, clear enough to chill the inside of my skull. "You were here. You never left. Where?" I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor, spinning the sound around me, whispers from all sides, climbing the walls, slipping into vents, weaving through the hum of the lights. The rain outside grew heavier, and for a moment, it stopped sounding like rain at all. It sounded like breathing. Shallow, synchronized, hundreds of breaths pressed together against glass. And beneath it, the faint creak of a door hinge. I turned slowly. The main entrance to Theater 9, the one I had shut when I came in, was now wide open. Beyond it, the hallway was dark, slick with rainwater, and from somewhere in that darkness came the same whisper, stretched thin but unmistakable. "They're waiting in the theater." When for a second, the air behind me shifted, warm against the back of my neck, and in that moment I knew the whisper wasn't echoing anymore. It was standing right beside me. The air was breathing again. Not fast, not loud, but slow, patient, as though the room had lungs and I was standing inside them. I moved toward the operating table. The reel-to-reel recorder was still spinning, though the tape had run out. Its empty reel rotated with a soft hiss, repeating the same inch of sound over and over, a whisper caught in a loop. "Don't let sleep again." I leaned closer. The metal casing was warm, almost alive under my fingertips. Beside it, buried under a sheet of soot, I noticed something small, a microphone, old, with a braided cable curling into the darkness beneath the table, the kind they used in mid-century operating theaters to record procedures. The cable led to a narrow cabinet set into the wall. The door was half fused from heat, but a gap remained. Through it, I could see the faint glint of other reels, dozens of them, each labeled in trembling handwriting. Theater 9, Session 1. Theater 9, Session 2. Session 3, 3157. The number made my skin tighten. I pulled the cabinet door open. The smell of burned paper and formalin rushed out, sharp, chemical, and wet. The shelves were lined with metal cases, each coated in ash. One case lay open, reel still inside, half melted. A faint pulse of sound drifted from it, like a heartbeat slowed through water. I set it on the table, brushed away the soot, and fed the tape into the machine. When I pressed play, the room seemed to hold its breath. Static first, then a voicemail, confident, clinical. Procedure log, Theater 9, Dr. Ellery speaking. Subject exhibits responsive vocal reflexes during induced death phase. The voice paused, then quieter. Listening, it's listening. I felt something shift under my shoes, a soft vibration, like words crawling through the floor. The tape continued. Another voice entered, trembling, distorted, almost pleading. I can still hear you. I'm not asleep. Please. A sharp burst of static cut it off. Through it, faint laughter, then whispering layered over, whispering until it was no longer human speech, just rhythm breath, pulse, rain. Repeat. I bent down, pressing my ear near the speaker. The whisper formed words again, clearer now, spoken by someone else entirely. You were here. You spoke to us. It was my own voice. The reel whined, speeding up. The words twisted, layered, overlapping in rising pitch until they blurred into a single long tone that made my teeth ache. Then silence. The lamp above me flickered once, then steadied. For a heartbeat, I saw movement reflected in the chrome of the surgical tray, a shape behind me, indistinct, standing too close. I turned. Nothing there. Only the reflection in the tray, but the reflection was wrong. It showed me still facing the tape, still leaning close to listen, though I was already looking away. The version of me in the reflection was whispering something, lips moving slowly. I couldn't hear it, but I could see the shape of the words. Stay awake. The light exploded, a flash, white and sharp, then total black. From the darkness came a hiss, followed by the squeal of the microphone activating. I could hear my own breathing amplified through the theater speakers. Entry log, 2340. The voice repeated, but I wasn't speaking. It wasn't playback either. It was recording me now. The sound of the rain outside faded. The walls pulsed faintly in rhythm with my heart. And through the speakers, layered over my breath, another whisper, slow, careful, deliberate. You're not recording the theater. Well-tuned. The theater is recording you. And stained. Then the reel stopped spinning. And the silence that followed felt exactly like listening to something inhale before it answers. When the reel stopped spinning, I waited for the whisper to come back. But nothing did. The theater was finally still. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My throat burned from the dry air, my pulse slowing to a rhythm that finally belonged to me again. The lamp above flickered once more, but this time it stayed on dim, steady, human. I turned off the recorder, coiled the tape back into its reel, and set it gently on the table. My hands shook, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. Everything that had happened, the whispers, the moving shadow, the voice that called itself mine, it could all be explained. Echoes, residual sound, old recordings misfiring. That's what I told myself. I walked to the far wall, where the writing "Stay Awake" had almost washed away. The moisture from the ceiling had erased half the words, leaving only A. Like the wall itself was trying to breathe the rest. I touched the letters. They felt warm. Behind me, the rain softened. The storm was finally breaking apart, the drops falling slower, calmer, until it sounded almost like a lullaby. I smiled a small, exhausted curve of the lips and packed my things. Before leaving, I decided to play back my personal recorder one last time to make sure I hadn't damaged it. The red light blinked weakly, and my own voice filled the silence. Entry log, 2340, Asheville Asylum, Theater 9. Then silence. Then, faintly, my voice again. Softer, lower. Don't let the theater sleep again. I froze. It was the same tone, the same cadence, but I never said those words. The playback clicked again, like someone stopping and rewinding from the other end. Another line followed, whispered through layers of static. We were awake when you arrived. Now, I stopped the tape, pressed rewind, then play. This time, it was gone. Only my breathing remained. The rational part of my mind clung to explanations: audio bleed, mechanical loop, the metal expanding in the damp. Still, something inside me knew. I gathered the recorder and headed for the door. It stood open now, the hallway beyond filled with the soft hiss of rain. The air smelled cleaner, almost fresh. When I looked back one last time, the operating table stood empty under the light, the tape reels still. It was over. I stepped out into the hall. The door swung shut behind me with a sigh. I made it halfway down the corridor before I noticed the sound. At first, it blended with the rain, a soft, even rhythm. Then I realized it wasn't outside. It was coming from my pocket. The recorder's light was blinking again, slow and steady. I lifted it, pressed play, and heard the rain, but not the rain from outside. It was the same storm, same night, same room. "You're still inside," Nuck said. The whisper came from every direction at once, through the speaker, through the walls, through the air. I turned toward the theater door. It was open again. Inside, the lamp swayed gently. The table gleamed wet under the light, as if someone had just wiped it clean. And on the far wall, where the chalk had almost vanished, the missing letters had returned, written fresh, white and shaking. "Stay awake." The corridor looked longer than before. The rain on the windows no longer sounded like rain. It sounded like tape running, each drop a small click of memory being rewound. I walked, or thought I did. Every few steps the floor gave a sigh, like I was treading on lungs. The recorder in my pocket still blinked, steady as a pulse. "You're still inside." The voice bled through the static again. I stopped. "No," I whispered. "I'm out. Angry." The echo came back a half-second late, the way it always had, but this time the echo laughed. A low, careful laugh, coming from the walls. The light above me buzzed and dimmed. For a moment, the entire hallway became transparent. A corridor made of sound instead of bricks. I could see the theater through the wall, the lamp swaying over the table, the reels turning again. Except now there was someone standing at the table. A man in a soaked lab coat, head tilted, one hand resting on the microphone. Me. He raised his head slowly, and though the glass between us should have kept us apart, I heard the breath in my own ear. "You forgot to sign the log. Ready." I backed away, but the corridor bent with me, folding like film curling under heat. Each step left a faint recording of itself behind a whispered echo repeating step, 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 until the air was crowded with overlapping versions of my movement. The rain outside thickened. It no longer fell. It recited, 3, 3, 1, 5, 7. The numbers filled every vent, every pipe, like the building itself was counting down. The theater door ahead of me was open again, light spilling out in rhythmic flashes. I should have run the other way, but the corridor behind me was already gone, replaced by blackness that pulsed in time with the rain. I stepped inside. The tape machine was turning on its own. The microphone hung from its cord like a pendulum, swinging above the table. The lamp's light grew brighter, too white to be electric. In its glare, I saw outlines pressed into the wall's hands, dozens of them, reaching outward from inside the plaster. Each hand moved slightly, fingertips tracing words into the soot. Awake. Listen. Remember. I stumbled forward. "What do you want?" "No." Every hand stopped. And then the answer came, not from the tape, not from the walls, but from the air vibrating inside my chest. To keep recording, resting. The reels spun faster, the tape screaming against the heads. My name spilled out between the squeals, spoken in my own voice, over and over. "Doctor, doctor, doctor." I grabbed the power cable and yanked. Sparks burst, smoke rising, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, folding into itself until it became one long, continuous breath. The light burst, darkness returned, heavy, absolute. And in that blackness, something cold brushed my hand, the microphone. Its cable slithered across the floor and wound itself around my wrist, the metal head resting against my pulse. "Now speak, or find Frommarians." I shook it off, stumbled toward the exit, but the door was sealed again. I pushed, shoulder first. The hinges groaned, then gave way with a sound like ripping cloth. Cold rain crashed over me as I fell through. I landed hard on the flooded tiles of the outer corridor, water spreading around my hands. Behind me, the theater's door slammed shut. The sound cut off instantly. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, just the storm. Real, clean, living. Then the recorder in my pocket clicked. It had turned itself back on. I lifted it with shaking hands. The red light pulsed once. Then a voice whispered, soft, almost tender, "Transfer complete." But as self, the rain's rhythm matched it. 3 drops. Pause. 1. The same pattern again. I ran, through the hall, through the broken lobby, past the rusted sign that still read, Asheville Asylum. The storm swallowed me, the cold biting through my clothes. When I reached the main gate, a single light glowed through the fog. A van. White. Engine idling. The driver's window rolled down, but no one sat inside. From the open back doors came the faint hum of equipment, reel-to-reel machines stacked in rows, all spinning slowly. Each reel carried a label. Theater 9, New Voice. My name was written beneath. The machines played in perfect unison, and from every speaker came my own voice. Soft, calm, professional. Entry log 0331. Asheville Asylum. Theater 9 inspection in progress. Was exactly the way I'd started. The rain eased. The fog folded over the van like a curtain. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the passenger seat. A figure leaning forward, hand resting on a microphone. Then the engine shifted into reverse. The headlights dimmed. And through the mist, just before it vanished, I heard the whisper one last time, gentle as breath against glass. "The theater never sleeps." I would left a day. Dawn came slowly, pale and gray, dissolving the fog that had swallowed Asheville whole. By the time I reached the main road, the rain had stopped. The van was gone. Only the marks of its tires remained long, dark lines fading into the mist. I walked until the asylum was a shadow behind me, its windows catching the weak morning light like tired eyes. When I finally reached town, no one believed where I'd been. The hospital records said Theater 9 had been demolished years ago. The reconstruction never happened. There was no power, no equipment, no reels. And yet, in my pocket, the recorder was still there, dry, unbroken, light blinking faintly. I played it once, half expecting silence. Instead, a clear voice spoke. Calm. Familiar. Inspection complete. Theater 9. Transferred to Hollowford Medical. Ratty Self. I froze. The name stirred something in me. Hollowford, the university hospital on the coast. They were known for their new research lab, the one with the glass walls. I pressed rewind. The tape crackled, hissed. Then, faintly, through the distortion, new experiment, visual resonance, mirror phase. The air around me felt colder. Across the street, a delivery truck rumbled past white, unmarked. On its side, under a film of rain, I caught a glimpse of letters stenciled in fading paint. Thornwood. The truck turned a corner and was gone, leaving only the hum of its engine and a faint echo that shouldn't have existed outdoors. A whisper, drifting through the morning wind. We hear you, Doctor. Allus. The recorder clicked off. I stood alone on the empty street, the light growing stronger but colder. In the glass of a nearby shop window, I saw my reflection watching me, and for the briefest moment, its lips moved first. The theater never sleeps. Buy-in. Story 4. Thornwood Mirror. The rain hadn't stopped since I arrived at Hollowford University. It slid along the laboratory windows in slow, crooked lines, distorting the light until the whole corridor looked like it was breathing. The new lab, my lab, sat at the end of the old Thornwood wing, once a monastery, now part of the neuroscience department. The air smelled of disinfectant and damp wood. On the far wall waited the delivery, a tall mirror wrapped in linen, the wooden frame dark and rough like bark. The tag still clung to it, smudged but legible. Origin, Ashvale Asylum, Theater 9. I peeled the cloth back. The surface beneath was dull, not silver but a gray that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. My own image shimmered there, late and uncertain, as if it were thinking before moving. I lifted my hand, tapped the glass once. The sound echoed back half a second too late. Then again. 3 slow knocks. 1 pause. And beneath the surface, faintly, a whisper answered. She hears before she sees. Haveti. I started the diagnostics out of habit recording devices, EEG monitor, pulse sensor. The air in the lab hummed with soft electricity, that steady, mechanical heartbeat every researcher learns to love. The mirror stood opposite me, its surface darker now that the overhead lights had dimmed. It didn't reflect the lab clearly. Instead, it caught movement as a haze, a shimmer that seemed to breathe when I did. For calibration, I played a test tone 440 Hz, pure and even. The sensor should have shown a mirrored waveform on both channels. It didn't. A second signal appeared beneath the tone, faint but steady, pulsing at 33 Hz. It wasn't interference. It was rhythmic. I isolated the layer, increased gain. The waveform repeated in perfect sequence, 3 beats. Pause. 1. The same strange cadence from the night I first arrived. The speakers hissed once. Then a sound came through that made my throat tighten. A heartbeat. Wet, deliberate, almost human. I looked at the mirror. My reflection was faint, my face stretched and gray, eyes a fraction of a second too slow to follow my own movement. When I lifted my hand, the reflection hesitated, then raised its own. Not mirrored. Opposite. The pulse on the monitor spiked. I turned down the lights further to reduce glare. That's when I noticed condensation spreading from the edges of the glass, a soft mist forming inside the surface, as though the mirror were fogging from within. I leaned closer, watching the moisture gather. When I exhaled, the fog thickened, and for a heartbeat it formed the shape of another mouth just below mine, whispering through the mist. No sound, only movement. Then, softly, from somewhere inside the glass, 3 distinct taps answered my breath. Knock, knock, knock. The EEG alarmed sudden, sharp, as if it had detected a neural pattern where no subject was connected. I checked the screen. A waveform flickered across it, pulse-like, echoing the rhythm of the knocks. 33, 33, 1, 5, 7. The same numeric sequence I'd seen carved into the asylum logs. The speakers hissed again. A voice slipped through, low, female, fragmented by static. Dr. Ellery, transfer confirmed. The lights flickered once. When they steadied, the reflection in the mirror was smiling. I wasn't. At first, I thought the sound was feedback. A loop between the sensors and the speakers, something technical, logical. But then the pulse deepened, warm and organic, filling the air like a slow inhalation. The lights along the ceiling began to tremble in rhythm. Each flicker matched the waveform on the monitor. 3 flashes, a pause, then one long surge of brightness before the room fell back into shadow. I turned off the amplifier. The sound didn't stop. It was still there, faint, beneath the hum of the equipment, a beating, slow and deliberate, echoing through the metal tables and glass jars. I felt it in my ribs. The mirror's surface was no longer flat. A ripple moved across it, gentle at first, as if a stone had dropped into a pond behind the glass. My reflection blurred, split, and reformed, but not perfectly. The version of me inside the mirror moved a second too soon, breathing before I did. I whispered, "Hello, 1." The speakers crackled, and a whisper answered my voice, but thinner, quieter, spoken from the other side of the glass. "Hello, I've been here. No facts." A cold wind crawled across the floor, stirring the papers on my desk. The EEG monitor blinked erratically. The sensors, still connected to nothing, were now tracing waves, someone else's brain activity. I turned to check the cables, and that was when I noticed it. The reflection of the lab behind me wasn't the same as the room I stood in. In the mirror, the desks were older. The walls were soot-stained, and on the back wall, just faintly visible through layers of fogged glass, were the words, "Theater 9, Way." I stumbled backward. The heartbeats grew faster, blending with the rain hammering against the windows. The sound from the mirror rose to match it, not echoing anymore, but joining in until both sides of the glass were breathing together. I could hear words forming now, layered between the pulses. First a murmur, then a rhythm of speech, voices overlapping. Dozens of them, men, women, whispering names, numbers, sentences that broke apart midair. She hears before she sees. "Dr. Ellery, it's ready. Recording, always recording." The microphone on my desk switched on by itself, the red light blinking. The reel-to-reel device, untouched, began to turn slow at first, then faster, spooling invisible sound. I reached for the power cord, but froze when the mirror itself began to hum. It was a vibration so low I felt it through the soles of my shoes. Every object in the room joined in the window panes, the metal shelves, even the pulse in my throat, all trembling to the same impossible note. And through that single tone came a soft tapping. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause. Then one last, heavier thud, like something pressing from the other side of the glass. The condensation cleared just enough for me to see a handprint, not mine, forming slowly on the inside surface. Each finger left a trail of frost as it spread outward. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep within the reflection, a woman's voice whispered, "The mirror remembers. Wires ends." The hum stopped. The lights steadied. And in the sudden silence that followed, the handprint faded, leaving behind only the faint outline of 5 numbers scratched into the glass. 3 vertical bar, 3 vertical bar, 1 vertical bar, 5 vertical bar, 7. I decided to record it. If this was just a delay, some optical interference, then the footage would prove it. I positioned the camera on the counter, lens aimed squarely at the Thornwood mirror. Its surface was still slightly fogged, the frame damp where rainwater had crept through the old stone walls. The timer light blinked red. I stepped back, raised my hand in front of the glass, and waved. The reflection moved first. Half a second earlier. No distortion, no lag. It anticipated me. I froze. My breath clouded the air. The reflection held its pose, perfectly still, until I moved again. When I lifted my right hand, it raised its left, but when I lifted my left, it copied exactly. Not mirror, not reverse. It had learned the pattern. I turned off the camera, heart hammering. The screen still glowed faintly, showing a static frame of me facing the glass. Except the version on the screen blinked. I replayed the footage, frame by frame. Each time I paused, the reflection inside the video moved fractionally, more mouth-opening, head-tilting, whispering words too soft for the microphone to catch. The speakers on my desk crackled, picking up low-frequency noise, 33 hertzes, the same rhythm. I turned the volume up. Through the distortion, a voice threaded itself into the sound. Soft, male, deliberate. Dr. Ellery, log continuation, subject responsive, maintains visual contact. 2. The name punched through me. I had read it before in the Ashvale transcripts. The researcher who disappeared in Theater 9. I checked the timestamp. The file wasn't named after me. It was titled Theater 9 Transfer 4. The reel-to-reel machine in the corner clicked on. The tape moved, though I hadn't touched it. My voice filled the air. Entry log 0331, Hollowford University, Thornwood Wing, Way. I covered my mouth, but the voice continued, calm, steady, precise, reading my notes from earlier, word for word, but continuing beyond them. The reflection now anticipates response. Subject aware of delay inversion. Recommend containment and disdefer. I whispered, stop, and self. The tape obeyed. But in the mirror, my reflection kept talking. Its lips moved slowly, forming each syllable like a prayer. I leaned closer. The sound returned not from the speakers this time, but from inside the glass itself, like whispers traveling through frozen air. She hears before she sees. The lights flickered once, twice. The mirror brightened from within, revealing a faint glow beyond the surface. Shapes moved in the light, an operating table, a microphone, the glint of metal instruments. Theater 9. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The reflection didn't follow. It stayed, watching, smiling faintly. From the reel to reel, a woman's voice joined in, breathless, trembling. The transfer's complete. Begin the next recording. Lines. The glow in the mirror pulsed. A sound like glass flexing filled the room, deep and alive. I could see movement behind my reflection now, figures half-formed, like shadows swimming just beneath the surface. And then, a hand pressed against the inside of the mirror. Not a print, a real hand, wet, pale, trembling. The glass bowed outward beneath the pressure, veins of light cracking through it like frost. I staggered forward, unable to stop myself. My fingers brushed the surface, and for a second, it was warm. A whisper slipped between the cracks. "You've already crossed. Body." Then the light died. The mirror went black again, reflecting only me. But the handprint stayed clear, perfect, pulsing faintly with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The silence after the light went out was almost kind. Only the rain remained soft, rhythmic, normal. The mirror reflected nothing but the room again. No glow, no handprint, no movement beneath the surface. Just me, pale, shaken, breathing too fast. I stood there for a long time, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The sensors had stopped blinking. The EEG monitor was flatlined, the reel-to-reel motionless. Even the smell of ozone and heat had faded. I told myself it had been a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion, a reflection of my own heartbeat fed back through the equipment. That explanation fit neatly enough to believe. I unplugged the devices, shut down the monitors, and began logging the incident. 2147 anomalous reflection observed. Possible electromagnetic interference. Mirror stable post-test. End of report. But I am tamed. The simple act of writing steadied my hands. The tremor left them one finger at a time. I packed the camera last. Its small display screen still glowed, showing the frozen image of me standing before the mirror. I smiled just a tiny, relieved exhale and pressed rewind to clear the memory card. The screen flickered. For a moment, static replaced the image. Then it returned, same frame, same room. But my reflection in the video was still moving. It wasn't replay. The image was live. The figure on the screen blinked, tilted its head, and raised a hand palm forward, like a wave. Behind it, the surface of the mirror rippled faintly, as though something were breathing beneath the glass again. I turned slowly toward the real mirror. It was perfectly still. The reflection inside the video smiled. The audio meter on the camera spiked. A faint sound bled through, not static, but whispering, recorded low enough that I had to lean close to hear. "You didn't unplug us." The lights flickered once. When they steadied, I realized the power cables I'd pulled were back in their sockets. The machines on the desk hummed softly, reels beginning to turn again. I stepped back. The hum deepened into a pulse, steady, measured, calm. Transfer continuing. I froze. "No," I whispered. "It's off." Has SETI in freshen? The whisper in the room answered the same tone, the same voice repeating me in perfect synchrony. "No, it's off, but..." Then the sound came again, 3 slow knocks, this time not from the mirror, but from inside the wall behind it. I snatched my coat, heart pounding, and backed toward the door. My hand found the handle. I hesitated just long enough to look back one last time. The mirror was empty. No movement, no glow. I almost believed it. Then the camera on the desk beeped soft, cheerful, mechanical. Its screen showed the live feed again. But now the reflection wasn't me anymore. Someone else was standing there, in the same coat, same posture, staring straight into the lens. Their lips moved silently. I leaned in. The playback caught their final whisper before the feed cut to black. The theater sent me first. My rings. The hallway outside the lab was dark. Only the exit sign burned faintly red through the misting air. I didn't look back at first. The hum behind me had quieted, and I told myself it was over. But halfway down the corridor, something answered my footsteps one beat behind. Soft, wet, deliberate. When I stopped, it stopped. When I breathed, it breathed. The reflection was following me. Not inside the glass, now through it. The windows along the corridor shimmered faintly, each pane holding a fragment of me. Some looked older, some younger, all watched as I passed. Their lips moved. No sound at first, just the shape of words I didn't want to read. Then, in a single, synchronized whisper, they spoke, "Stay awake," and I ran. The corridor bent unnaturally, looping back toward the lab. Every turn returned me to the same door, Thornwood Laboratory 3. The hum inside had grown louder, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the floor. I pushed the door open. The mirror stood waiting. Its surface wasn't dark anymore. It was alive liquid silver, trembling with light, forming waves that pulsed outward from the center like ripples of breath. Inside the glass, I saw the lab as it had been an hour ago. Me standing at the desk, writing, unaware. Then, further back, through layers of reflection, another image, the theater, the operating lamp, the microphone. And somewhere between them, shadows moved, shapes of people watching, their faces pressed to the other side of the glass. The reel-to-reel started on its own. My voice filled the air again. Entry log, transfer phase initiated. Subject aligned. With you, spirit? No, I whispered. I didn't say that. Now nothing. The reflection spoke back, perfectly synchronized my mouth, moving in both worlds. You did, wasn't? I reached for the nearest chair and hurled it at the mirror. It struck the surface, but instead of shattering, it sank. Like the glass was water. The chair drifted out of sight, disappearing into silver light. The surface rippled once, then smoothed. My reflection stepped forward, not mirrored, aligned. It raised its hand in time with mine, matching perfectly. Every blink, every tremor of breath, simultaneous. For the first time, I realized I wasn't watching a reflection. I was watching a recording replay itself in real time. The mirror was showing me the moment I would cross. Behind the reflection, faint light flickered, the same dull yellow from Ashvale's theater lamp. I heard the voice again, this time layered over itself dozens of times, building to a chant. Transfer complete. Transfer complete. Transfer complete. As Act 4 way. The mirror rippled violently. The surface bulged outward, stretching thin like a membrane ready to burst. From within, hands pressed against the glass, hundreds of them, pale and trembling. I backed away, slipping on the wet floor. The hum deepened to a pitch that rattled my teeth. A crack raced through the mirror's surface, light leaking out in thin beams. Then came the gore. 3 slow knocks from inside. Pause. One harder, like something trying to remember the rhythm of life. The crack widened. Through it, I saw eyes staring out my own. "Let me out," the voice said. Except my lips hadn't moved. I screamed, grabbed the nearest stool, and swung with everything I had. The glass shattered outward, not like breaking, but exploding. Shards flew across the room, gleaming with trapped light, each piece reflecting a different version of me. I ran, out of the lab, down the corridor, through the heavy doors that led to the courtyard. The night air hit like ice. The storm had returned, wind whipping the rain sideways. Every puddle reflected the mirror's light, the fragments of my own image scattered across the wet ground. I could still hear it faint. Beneath the storm, the whisper coming from every shard, every reflection. "We're still recording, and Leighton ones, so have har." I kept running until I reached the gate at the edge of the university grounds. The rain eased for a moment, long enough for me to catch my breath. Then, in the window of the security booth, I saw it again. Not my reflection, the other one, standing behind me. It lifted its hand, slow, deliberate, pressing its palm to the glass. And from the other side of the rain-smeared window, I heard a voice I knew too well. "Transfer complete. Doctor, I'm Selfix." The window fogged over from inside. A heartbeat echoed once. Then nothing. When I turned around, the courtyard was empty. When I woke, everything was white. White ceiling, white sheets, the sterile scent of alcohol and static. A nurse's voice murmured somewhere near my ear. "You're lucky, doctor. The blast shattered half the lab, but you survived." "But is Self?" I tried to answer, but my throat was dry, voice grainy like dust. On the bedside table sat my ID badge, half burned, and beside it a single shard of glass, sealed in a specimen bag. Someone had written on the label, "Thornwood fragment, do not touch." Through the fog of sleep, I noticed it the faintest shimmer inside the glass. Not reflection, movement. The nurse followed my gaze. "That piece was embedded in your hand," she said softly. "You must have clenched it when the mirror broke." "Wust?" I nodded weakly. The shard caught the light pale silver, pulsing once, like a heartbeat trapped inside. Later, when the ward quieted and the lights dimmed, I took the bag in my hand. The pulse quickened. And then, through the plastic, came a sound I'd hoped never to hear again. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. One slow tap. My monitor spiked. The lights above flickered. Across the room, the observation window misted over. My reflection formed slowly in the glass, standing, not lying down. It smiled. The voice came from the speaker at my bedside, calm and familiar. "Transfer confirmed. New containment site. Attic research wing. Presetting." I looked down. The shard in my hand was glowing. And faintly, from inside it, a whisper breathed back. "Stay awake, and I'll..." The heart monitor flatlined for half a second. Then, from the silence that followed, came one last sound. A single heartbeat. But it came from inside the glass. Story 5. The Attic's Pulse. The stairway to the attic wing had been locked for decades. The key turned with a sound like a gasp dry, sharp, alive. I climbed slowly, my torch tracing the ribs of the ceiling above, each beam coated in dust, the color of bone. With every step, the floorboards answered me. 3 dull thuds. A pause. One heavier, deliberate beat. By the time I reached the top, the sound had sunk into my chest. Not echoing, sinking. The door to the attic yielded under my hand. Cold air spilled out, metallic, laced with the scent of rust and rain-soaked wood. Inside, the room was filled wall to wall with machines, old recorders, reels, microphones, all humming quietly in the dark. Red lights blinked like a constellation of tiny hearts. On the far table sat a box made of dark, thornwood timber, its surface cracked and wet as if it had been breathing. A faint heartbeat came from within. Pinned to its lid was a note in fading ink. Attic wing, audio storage, Ashvale, Aurelia, Thornwood. Thanks for watching. And underneath, one more line freshly written, in trembling hand. Final transfer, awaiting host. Way. I flicked the main breaker. The lights coughed to life, one by one, revealing rows of recorders and open reels stacked like relics. None of them should have been running. The wiring up here was decades old, but every machine hummed softly, their reels turning in perfect synchrony. The air vibrated with a sound I couldn't quite place. Not quite mechanical, not natural either. Low, rhythmic, familiar. I pressed my hand against the nearest table. The wood trembled beneath my palm once, twice, 3 times. Pause. One more. The same pulse I'd heard on the stairs. I knelt, listening closer. The sound wasn't coming from the machines. It came from under the floorboards, deep and slow, like the attic itself was breathing through the wood. I opened one of the recorders. Inside, the tape spun on an empty reel, printing nothing but silence. Still, the VU meters quivered in rhythm, as though they were measuring something invisible. Curious, I connected my headset and pressed monitor. At first, static, then faintly under the hiss, a pattern emerged. Breathing, shallow, overlapping, dozens of voices all inhaling at once. I turned the gain up. The noise became clearer, whispering threaded through the breath. Snippets of sentences, names, fragments of old logs. Ashvale intake. Aurelia transfer complete. Thornwood mirror breached. I pulled the headset off. Every machine in the room responded at once. The reels stopped, then reversed. Tape unspooled across the floor like veins, winding toward the box on the far table. The heartbeat quickened. I stepped closer. The lid of the Thornwood box was slick with condensation, the grain of the wood darkening in pulses. Each beat sent tiny ripples through a puddle forming on the floor beneath it. When I leaned closer, the hum in the air shifted pitch, matching my own heartbeat perfectly. For a few seconds, the 2 rhythms merged, mine and the attic's, until I couldn't tell which belonged to me. A faint voice came from inside the box, muffled by wood and time. Host confirmed. The reels started spinning again, faster now, the sound growing into a steady thrum that filled every inch of the attic. I backed away, staring at the machines. They weren't playing recordings. They were playing me. The room began to breathe. It wasn't imagination. The air itself thickened, moving in long, slow inhalations that made the dust swirl like mist caught in a lung. The hum that had filled the attic deepened until it became a single, continuous heartbeat. The reels turned faster, the tapes strained, fluttering in loops. Each time they brushed the air, they whispered, "We're still here, not." The cables along the floor began to twitch, snaking toward the thornwood box. Their copper tips sparked faintly, joining together at its base like veins seeking a heart. I took a step back. The light bulbs overhead pulsed dimly, in sync with the sound. 3 flashes, pause, 1 long. The attic was breathing through the wiring, exhaling warmth, inhaling dust. A metallic creak sounded from the rafters above me, long and low, almost like a sigh. Then another, louder, closer. The old beams shuddered, wood groaning in sympathy with the rhythm. I pressed my palm against the wall. It was warm. Not metaphorical warmth, body warmth. Behind the timber, something shifted, like a slow muscle flexing beneath a layer of skin. The whispering grew louder, from one voice to 2, to dozens, to a chorus so thick it felt like water filling the air. Every syllable was the same, weaving through the pulse. "Stay awake, stay awake, stay awake." I shouted back, "Stop it. True seppen." The sound obeyed. For a heartbeat, silence. Then knock, knock, knock. Pause. One long thud that shook the floorboards. The thornwood box shivered violently. Water or something like it seeped from its seams, dark and metallic smelling. The puddle spread, touching the cords, and the whole room lit with a faint orange glow, as though fire were burning under the floor. The reels began to play backward. Voices unraveled from them in reverse, rising and falling, 1,000 heartbeats stitched into static. I could hear my own voice among them, scattered, panicked, caught mid-breath. I didn't record this. Who's speaking? Theater 9. Stop. The attic answered not in sound, but in movement. The floorboards bulged upward in slow waves. Between the cracks, a dark pulse flickered, keeping perfect time with the heartbeat. I fell to my knees, clutching my chest. My pulse was no longer mine. It followed the rhythm beneath the floor. When I slowed my breathing, it slowed with me. When I gasped, it quickened, as if the attic were mirroring every second of my life back to me, echo by echo, beat by beat. Then came a faint, wet whisper through the headset lying on the desk. A woman's voice, calm, soft. Final transfer pending. All voices inbound. No. The words threaded through the hum like silk through bone. The red lights of the machines blinked in sequence, first 1, then 10, then all. The room filled with a glow that pulsed in time with the sound. I stumbled toward the door, but it had sealed itself shut. The hinges were gone, replaced by veins of dark wood that throbbed faintly, sealing the way out. The attic took another breath. This time, I felt it enter me. The heartbeat under the floor had grown faster. Not frantic, deliberate, like something beneath the boards was preparing. The thornwood box sat at the center of it all, trembling faintly, drops of condensation tracing its carved edges. Every time the pulse struck, the grain of the wood swelled and contracted, as if the box itself were breathing. I moved closer, drawn to it by something more than curiosity, a sense of recognition. The air around it hummed softly, pulling the hairs on my arms upright. The moment I touched the lid, the hum became a low whisper. Host confirmed. Traxons. My heart stumbled in my chest. The whisper hadn't come from inside the box, it came from me. My fingers shook as I lifted the lid. The hinges exhaled a wet sigh. Inside lay a single object, resting on black felt, a fragment of mirror, its edges wrapped in silver wire, the surface dulled by age but still faintly luminous. Even through the dust, I could see light moving inside it, too deep to be a reflection. I leaned closer. At first, I saw only my own face pale, distorted. Then the image shifted, rippling outward like a pond disturbed by breath. The reflection expanded into another room. White walls, tiled floor, surgical lamp. I knew it instantly. Theater 9. On the table, beneath that sterile light, lay a body mine. The reflection of me didn't breathe. Its eyes were closed. Around it, shadowed figures stood perfectly still, their faces turned toward me, waiting. A hum rose from the floorboards, low and resonant. Every machine in the attic joined in, each reel turning backward, the tape unspooling toward the mirror fragment, as if drawn by magnetism. The reflected figures began to move. One by one, the mortuary driver from Sant, Aurelia, the nurse from Ashvale, the researcher from Thornwood. Their mouths opened in unison, and a single phrase escaped through the glass. Final recording in progress. Rewanade. I stumbled back, but the mirror's glow flared, swallowing the shadows. Now it showed the attic itself from above, and me standing in its center, staring down into the very mirror that was showing me. An endless loop of reflection folding inward. The voice came again, everywhere at once, soft as air drawn between teeth. The heart is awake, and the floorboards rippled beneath my feet, swelling upward with each pulse. The heartbeat was no longer under the wood, it was inside it. Every board, every nail, every grain of dust was throbbing. I tried to drop the mirror fragment, but my fingers wouldn't obey. It pulsed against my palm, syncing perfectly with the beat in my chest. The light within the shard deepened, turning the room the color of blood seen through skin. I could see faint shapes forming behind the glow silhouettes pressing against the other side of the glass, mouths opening and closing without sound. And then I heard it again, faint, layered, all the voices from every story whispering in time. Ashvale, Aurelia, Thornwood, Hollowford. The shard pulsed one final time, a heavy, living thump that shook the rafters. I felt something slip from my chest, drawn toward the mirror, as if my heartbeat had been caught and pulled through a thread. My vision blurred. Through the haze, the reflection changed once more the same attic, empty now. No body, no box. Only the mirror lying open on the floor, its surface glowing faintly. And from deep inside it, a quiet, steady sound. Thump, thump, thump. When the light from the mirror finally died, the attic went completely still. No hum, no breathing walls, just silence vast, deep, and clean. The heartbeat was gone. It had stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only the faint creak of old timber settling back into place. For the first time since I entered the attic, I could hear my own breath. Slow, uneven, real. The machines had gone quiet. The reels hung limp. The tapes pooled at their bases like black ribbons. The thornwood box lay open on the table, empty. The mirror shard was gone. I waited. Nothing moved. Finally, I sat down, my knees shaking, and began writing the final report by hand. 2350. Anomalous resonance ceased. All activity terminated. Mirror fragment missing. Cause, structural vibration. No further pulse detected. Ready. I read the words twice, just to hear something human in the sound of my pen. Each letter steadied me a little more. When I finished, I closed my notebook and looked around the attic one last time. The air was cooler now, easier to breathe. I could almost believe it was over. Then I noticed a small mark on the page I had just written. A faint smear at the bottom, as if my pen had kept moving after I stopped. Another line was forming. Slowly, carefully, as though written by a trembling hand. Transfer successful. Writer. The pen rolled off the table. It hit the floor with a soft knock. Then another. 3 slow taps. Pause. One louder, echoing deep through the wood beneath me. The pulse was back. I pressed my palm to the floor. At first, nothing, then a single, faint throb, and with it, warmth. The air thickened again, the smell of metal rising like breath from below. I stood up too fast, chair clattering behind me. The machines on the shelves flickered. One by one, their red lights blinked back to life. Slow, synchronized, deliberate. The hum returned quiet at first, almost gentle, like something waking from a long sleep. I tore the final page from my notebook, crumpled it in my hand, and shoved it into my coat pocket. But when I turned toward the door, the hinges creaked open on their own. A draft swept through, rustling the pages left on the table. They fluttered, one by one, until they arranged themselves into neat lines. Across the top sheet, in handwriting that wasn't mine, appeared the heading, Attic Research Log, Phase Complete. Will now. Below it, a single sentence. All recordings aligned. Heart reestablished. Well, the heartbeat filled the attic again, steady now, stronger, deeper, faster. It was no longer beneath the floor. It was everywhere. And when I pressed a hand to my chest, mine answered it, perfectly in time. The heartbeat didn't stop this time. It grew. Each pulse pressed through the floorboards like waves of heat, bending the air, rattling the lamps. I stumbled toward the door, but it swung shut before I reached it, not slammed, but pulled, like something on the other side was breathing in. The hum deepened, a single tone vibrating through my teeth. The walls bulged slightly with each beat, paint cracking, dust cascading down in soft, steady rhythm. The attic was moving. A low creak came from above, followed by another beneath my feet. The rafters flexed. The floor rose and fell in sync with the sound, slow, heavy, alive. Then the first voice came. Heartbeat aligned. It slipped through the speakers on the shelves, faint and wet, as though carried through water. Recordings converged. Dozens of machines joined in, the static from each merging into a single living breath. The air pulsed. I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming through air anymore. It was inside me. My chest ached with every thud beneath the floor, like something enormous was trying to sync its rhythm with mine, forcing me to match it, beat for beat. Stop. I whispered. "You're not me." "One SETI." The attic answered with a groan, a deep, resonant moan that made the walls bend inward. Splinters rained from the ceiling. The floor swelled beneath my feet, pushing me upward until I could feel the timber's warmth against my palms. And then I felt it, the heartbeat under my hand. It wasn't wood anymore. It was flesh. The planks were slick, damp, moving. Each throb pushed a pulse of warm air through the cracks. The heartbeat was no longer in the attic. The attic was the heartbeat. The speakers crackled again, voices layered and frantic now. Containment breached, attic phase initiated, all hosts online. I tried to run, but the floor caught my shoes like wet sand. Each board flexed, gripping tighter as the walls began to close in, bending toward the center like ribs protecting a heart. The red lights from the machines flared, merging into one enormous pulse of crimson. Through the glow, I saw the thornwood box somehow closed again, resting perfectly still on the table. I knew what it wanted. The hum inside me matched the one in the air. If I didn't stop it, they'd merge completely. I'd become the next recording, just another breath in the attic's lungs. I looked around desperately. The only thing within reach was the metal letter opener I'd used to pry the box lid earlier. Its blade gleamed faintly with the same dull light I'd seen in the mirror fragment. My heartbeat pounded harder. 3 beats. Pause. 1. The same pattern. The same command. If the attic was sinking to me, maybe I could break the rhythm. I pressed the blade against my wrist, just enough to feel the cold bite of metal, and whispered the numbers aloud. 3, 3, 1, 5, 7. The attic hesitated. For the first time, the pulse faltered a half-beat late. The walls shuddered. The sound distorted, the harmony breaking apart into stuttering echoes. I took a deep breath and drove the tip of the blade into my arm, not deep enough to kill, but enough to shock. My heartbeat skipped. The attic screamed. Every speaker howled at once. The lights burst. A rush of air surged outward, tearing through the dust, snapping the tapes from their reels. The floor split open beneath me. From the crack spilled red light, bright, wet, pulsing, and a sound that was no longer a heartbeat, but a roar. I stumbled back, clutching my arm, trying to reach the stairs. Behind me, the box slid from the table and hit the floor with a sickening thud. Its lid burst open. Inside, the mirror fragment glowed brighter than before, its light strobing in rhythm with the last few desperate beats of my heart. And within it, I saw my reflection calm, still, lips moving. Transfer complete. Backed from this, the world tilted. The roar became silence. When I blinked again, I was standing at the top of the stairs. The attic door was open. Light, real light, spilled in from the corridor below. I turned back once, just to see. The machines were dark. The box lay shattered. No sound, no breath. The attic was dead. I descended the stairs, one trembling step at a time. Each plank groaned beneath my feet. 3 times. Pause. Once more. They said the attic was empty. When the emergency crew arrived at dawn, they found nothing but soot and dust. The beams half collapsed. The machines fused into the floor like melted bone. No sign of me. Not even a footprint. The official report called it an electrical fault. Case closed. But a week later, students in the Hollowford Library started complaining about the sound. A low hum, rhythmic, faint at first, only audible at night. Campus security investigated. They traced the noise through the ventilation shafts, up through the closed stairwell that led to the attic wing. No power was running to that section. No machines were connected. Yet the hum was there, steady as breath. Then came the heartbeat. 3 beats. Pause. One heavy thud that made the windows tremble. The next night, the lights across the university flickered in perfect sync. Students described hearing a voice calm, measured, almost familiar, whispering through the speakers in every lecture hall. Recording in progress. Well, then a pause. Before we begin, listener, gently tap like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. 2. Every screen on campus lit at once. Static. Then a single frame, a still image of the attic door, now clean and whole again. Faint light seeping from underneath. Beneath the image, a small red indicator blinked. Live. The heartbeat started up again, slow, warm, human. But this time, it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the person watching. The stories end here, listener, but the sound does not. If you listen carefully in the spaces between your breaths, you might still hear it. A faint echo, a slow rhythm, beating from somewhere deep inside the dark. 3 beats. A pause. 1. To remind you you're still here. Maybe it's your heart. Or maybe it's ours still recording, still whispering, still waiting for the next host. When you close your eyes tonight, remember what they all said. The theater never sleeps. The mirror never breaks. And the attic still breathes. Just softly enough for you to mistake it for your own. So rest now. Let the sound fade in your chest. And if you hear the knock 3, pause. 1. Don't answer. Just keep breathing and stay awake a little longer. Good night, listener. We'll be right here, between the next heartbeat